Welcome everyone to our Study Abroad podcast series. So, today we have Aryaman Reddi, who was born in India, then did his schooling in Sri Lanka, and then moved to Cambridge and Germany. So, welcome Aryaman.
Hey, happy to be here.
So, Aryaman, you did your initial schooling in Colombo and then decided to go abroad for your master's and bachelor's. How was that initial decision? When was the time when you decided that okay, I should go abroad for further studies?
You're right. I did go to school in Colombo for essentially my whole life. And then it was around that time of middle school and moving into sixth form in the British system that I started applying for universities. I also applied for universities in the US and the UK at the same time. And in the end, I managed to get an offer from Cambridge University for engineering, and that's what I chose to go for in the end.
And how many colleges did you apply to?
In total, I must have applied to quite a few in the States. I think I must have applied to at least nine or 10. And in the UK, I believe you're still only allowed to apply to five universities with one UCAS application. So it was five over there. And in the US, it was kind of a mixture of schools. In the UK, it was also a mixture of schools, but in the end, Cambridge was the best offer. And I would say that was like a hard one to pass up. So that's what I ended up choosing.
Sure. And what documents or what test you had to do for application here?
For the application to the UK.
For both the application, what all tests did you go through?
So for the UK, first of all, there's the normal UCAS application, which has one essay that you have to write. Not really an essay, but rather, I believe it's called a personal statement, where you talk about why you're applying for that particular degree, that particular course. In my case, it was engineering, so I had to write a thing saying, this is why I want to study engineering, and this is like all the things I've done in school and in my personal hobbies and societies, extracurriculars that support my decision to go into engineering. And then also, when you apply to engineering at Cambridge in particular, there's also an additional exam that you have to do that they kind of tell you about. And I believe that there are some universities for certain courses, especially the technical ones, where you have an extra exam that must be done, which is just to test your proficiency in a couple of things. In the case of engineering, it was like mechanics and some mathematics that kind of goes beyond the regular A-level course. And meanwhile, for applying to the America, if you would like to talk about that also. So I believe it's the same system right now in America where you essentially have the common application, which is the essays that you write, and you can send those essays out to most of the schools that you apply because most colleges in America are applied to through the common application. I believe the only exceptions are one, I believe MIT has a separate application, and I believe also the UCs in California, so UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, um, and so on, have their own application system as well with some separate essays.
Sure. And after you chose Cambridge, how did you do your visa accommodation?
Yeah, so when you get into a university in the UK, they will send you all of the a list of all of the documents that they're going to require for you. And they also give you the invitation letter that you can then use to go and apply for your visa at the embassy. It's a very specific visa that you get. It's the student UK visa. That is the one that allows you to essentially live there as if you have a resident visa. But the only difference is that you're not allowed to take on any full-time work with that during the time of your study. So during term time, you are not allowed to go and have a full-time job because, of course, you're there for university.
Sure. And the accommodation, how did you find your accommodation in your case?
So in my case, it was actually provided for by the university. In Cambridge, you're always provided university during your undergraduate, so during your bachelor's. If you want to, you are able to opt out of it and go live somewhere else. But in my case, I decided to live in college for the whole time. And there they simply give you some options. with some different pricing schedules, and you can simply choose which one is the best fit for you.
Sure, sure, sure. And once you landed in UK, what were the initial surprises? Is it the first time you went to UK or you've been there before?
I had actually been there before for the interview for Cambridge, because they typically like if you can come for an in-person interview to sort of see how you are in person as someone who can go through the problems and whatnot. So I'd been already to my college. I went to Homerton College in Cambridge, which is one of the kind of bigger colleges in terms of how many people are there. And I'd already been there, sort of seen how the UK was in general. I have some relatives in the UK, so I was able to meet them already and kind of get some of a cultural idea of what the UK was like. I would say that there was no big culture shocks because of that. I would say that the UK is generally a culture of quite, easygoing, nice people. It's quite easy to fit in. Of course, if you speak English, then you already speak the language. You can talk to anybody. Generally, people are quite friendly. If you stop somebody on the road and ask for directions, they're more than happy to give it to you. So, yeah, overall, no big culture shocks or surprises.
Sure, sure. And what was the difference in the education system like? Did you find any specific differences, let's say Colombo education versus UK education?
Mhm. I would say one interesting difference between the UK universities and Sri Lankan universities. So I never went to a Sri Lankan university, but I did, I did attend one or two like lectures just to see kind of what it was when I was choosing my universities. And what I noticed was that in the Colombo universities, there was a much less personalized, let's say, experience than there was in Cambridge. In Cambridge, you have what's called these like tutor groups, where it's a couple of students who are being supervised by tutors on a very small group basis. It would be like anywhere from 2 to 10 people maximum, which means that you can really ask your supervisor, ask your tutor about specific questions within the course if you're not understanding something, and they can explain it to you. And you go through these problem sets together, which are teaching you about the course content. As far as I know, in Sri Lankan universities, there's essentially nothing like this. You're given your course assignments and you go to your lectures, which of course contain many, many people, maybe upwards of hundreds of people. But as for whether your work is actually going well or not, the only direct help you can get is going and talking to the professor, who of course maybe does not have that much time to talk to you, or talking to other people in your course to understand it. And so I liked that there was a very personalized experience in Cambridge. You could really go up to people individually and ask them for help.
For sure. How did you cope up with the cooking, cleaning, etc. during your transition? Was it hard? Was it easy or 50-50? Was it like,
I would say this was of course, a bit of a thing to get used to if you live at home with your parents before university, then typically and especially if you have Asian parents, which are all too happy to like, do all the cooking for you. You get to help, but usually they're the ones who are doing like a lot of the work. And also in terms of cleaning, if you live with people, then oftentimes somebody else will do the cleaning of the dishes and they will just make you do the cleaning of the laundry or something. You will have your various chores to be sorted out with. Going from this to going to university where you have to do everything yourself is a bit of a thing to get adjusted to. For example, when I went to university, I didn't quite understand all of the things of how to do my washing, how to separate my clothes, and then what exact cleaning products I'm supposed to use on my dishes, and what is the difference between this one and that one. So it was a bit of adjustment for sure, but I think it's actually one of the most important things about university is that you go and live somewhere where nobody's there to look after you anymore, and you have to figure it out. Because of course, there's the education aspect of university, but then there's also the becoming an adult aspect of university, which is just as, if not more important. Nobody is there to tell you you have to go and ask people or go and use the internet to figure all of these things out. So it was not a big problem for me, but looking back, it was really good that I went abroad for university and got the chance to figure that out myself.
sure, sure. Did you also do any part-time job internships while at Cambridge?
Yeah, I did a few internships while I was at Cambridge. Typically, at Cambridge, you're not allowed to work during the term time. And so I instead worked during my summer vacation at some internships. In my first summer internship, which was in 2018, I was working with one of the student teams within Cambridge Engineering, which was the Solar Car Society, which was an engineering project in society that was based around essentially developing and designing this solar powered vehicle to be used in this race that happens every year called the World Solar Challenge in Australia. So that was very interesting. It was kind of learning about all of these tools, which you might not ordinarily get the chance to look at in your normal engineering course, like CAD, like, SolidWorks, and also sort of aerospace or aero modeling tools like ANSYS and whatnot. My second internship, which is my in my after my second year of university, was at this company called ARM in Cambridge. ARM basically work on silicon and designing on chips. You can think of them as being like essentially what Intel does for personal computers, ARM does for a whole host of devices such as smartphones, IoT devices, and whatnot. They're essentially a processor designing company. And I did my first internship there in 2019, working on CPU architecture, which was very interesting. I kind of got to learn a different facet to electronic engineering to what I got in university. And then after that, in 2020, during COVID, I went back for another internship at ARM, this time also working on CPU architecture, but from the angle of verification, which is essentially within silicon verification is seeing whether all of the essentially tests and units that are within your processor designs are working efficiently with each other and how to fix those problems when they come up. And it was actually these two internships at ARM during my summers, which allowed me to get a graduate position with ARM before I even graduated university. At the end of my second internship, I got the offer to join as a graduate, which I think was a very good offer. I took that, and that was my first job after university. And I really kind of appreciate that. And I think it's certainly a good idea to get an internship during university at a company that you like because you will see what kind of work they're doing. You'll see what kind of work you will be cut out for later on. And if you get an offer, that means that you can immediately jump into some work, stay in the UK or stay in whichever country that you're in, and immediately start working, being productive, and making money, which will be very good for you after university.
Great, that's great. So I
Mm.
see that now you have moved to PhD. So how was this Cambridge to Germany transition happened for you?
Mm. So the way this transition happened was, first of all, I started applying for PhDs when I was still in the UK. I was still working at my employer, which was ARM, and I was applying to some programs around in the UK and also elsewhere in Europe. I was looking at things. But then I saw this position in Germany, which had very good funding and also a very good lab, which was an acclaimed lab that I had read some of their papers before. I knew they did good research. And so I applied to the professor there. We had some interviews, and he liked my general knowledge on the topic, my ideas for research, and he decided to take me on as a PhD student. In order to prepare for this, I had to do lots of research actually before applying for this particular topic. I had done my master's degree in this topic, so I knew something already. But during my 1 year working before my PhD, I spent a lot of time also doing self-study in my free time on this so that I'd be prepared for the interviews when they happen, prepared to jump into a PhD. And that was very useful as well. Then after I got the position, um, I was able to use that offer to go and apply for the visa. In Germany, there's a specific researcher visa that you get when you come as a PhD student or a postdoc or a professor. And with that visa, I was able to come to Germany and begin my work on the PhD. In terms of the transition from these two, I would say that Germany from the UK was actually surprisingly a bigger shock than coming to the UK from Sri Lanka, because in Germany they speak, of course, a completely different language. They speak German mostly, which is if you are only used to speaking English, and in my case, I was only used to speaking English and Asian languages such as Sinhala and Hindi. It's kind of more complicated, I would say. The grammar, everything, the kind of vocabulary is a bit more complicated. Just a bit of a shock, having to adjust to that, learning some German so that I could converse with people day to day. But eventually you get the hang of that as well. Also, culturally, it's a little bit different from Sri Lanka and the UK because people in Germany are maybe a bit more reserved and a bit more, let's say, or a bit less open and free with strangers. And you have to get to know people a little bit better before you're able to make some proper friends and some proper connections. And that maybe takes a bit of navigating because if you're coming from the UK, you're used to, or from Sri Lanka, certainly, you're used to a culture where you can be friends with somebody on day one of meeting them, and you can just go and have a drink or have some lunch with them, and then suddenly you're talking about these interesting conversation topics, and then you know someone. But in Germany, maybe you have to already work with someone for a few weeks or meet somebody outside a couple of times in different circumstances, and then they will slowly open up to you as a friend. And so this is one thing I would say, never be offended if you go to Germany and you can't make friends with someone the first time you meet them. It's just that they are socially a bit cautious people.
Sure, sure. What are your future goals from now?
So at the moment, I plan to finish my PhD in about one and a half, a little bit less than 1.5 years. So in March 2026 is the end date of my PhD. Once that's over, I intend to go back to the industry and do AI research in the company. The reason for this is because I believe that, after finishing with the academia, I would like to go back into work and see how I can apply my ideas and all of my things that I've learned in a practical setting. Once you finish a PhD, you broadly have two avenues you can go down. You can go down the academic route and become a postdoctoral researcher, which is the route you would go if you want to become a professor at some point, or you can go into industry. And my goals after my PhD in the industry would essentially to be to work at some company that is doing good AI research. Some examples of companies that are doing good AI research right now that people will definitely know about would be like OpenAI, which does all this interesting stuff with ChatGPT and Sora. Also Meta, which is now formerly called Facebook AI research, which does all of this interesting research that uses kind of analytics from markets and people to use AI in their whole business model. And then there's also interesting AI companies from another angle, such as computer vision, such as Tesla, and certain government agencies as well do a lot of good work with it. So those are just some examples of like well-known plugs in the industry, of which, I would be applying for things in that space.
Sure, sure. Coming to the very last question, what advice would you give to younger yourself?
The younger myself. That's an interesting question. I have to think about that for a moment. Hmm.
Yeah, think
What
about the
advice would I?
aspirants, who are like thinking about applying to Cambridge or going abroad. So those will be like
Hmm.
younger version of you.
Yeah. I will think about it. I will give two pieces of advice, which might sound contradictory, but are, I think, two things that could have helped me for sure when I was still applying for university. First piece of advice is you should think of your life in the long term. You might have some things that are very important to you in the short term in high school, or in sixth form. Many people are getting their first relationship, girlfriend, boyfriend, this kind of thing. And you might think like, oh, I'm becoming an adult, but my parents are still, treating me like a child, or they're not letting me do everything I want to do. They're trying to control my life. And you might think like, I find my work in school boring. I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. What's the point? But you should think about the fact that every decision that you make now is going to affect how things will go in the future. And if you can set yourself up really well right now, it will really pay dividends later on. For example, getting into a good university will put a target on your head that is like visible from space in terms of applying to anything ever again in your life. I can tell you from personal experience that going to Cambridge was not harder than any other university. It's not like they teach you some magic formula to engineering or law or chemistry that's different from any other university. You will learn the same things, but whenever I tell somebody that I went to Cambridge, it's like one immediate step above that shows that you went to this place which has like instant acclaim. That was so if you can get into a good school and you have the chance to, and you're deciding between a good school and one that's maybe closer to you, you have some girlfriend or boyfriend you want to be close to, so you'll go to a worse university. Put yourself first in that situation and think about your future. When you're young, you can be a little bit selfish like that and think like, I want to develop myself. Now, at the same time, I have a second piece of advice, which is while all of this stuff is very important, don't forget to focus on enjoying yourself in the short term. Too many students, especially in Asia, who get very pressured to do lots of work, go to tuition every day. You need to get your grades up, beta, you need good grades to secure your future, etc. You can get totally burned out by the time you go to university. You might completely hate your work, even if you like your subject. You're kind of pushed to do it so much, you will completely dislike it by the end of your schooling, and then you won't go to university. You have to really enjoy the time that you have in school with your friends, with all these people, because they really are some of the best times in your life. And as your life goes on, you only get more and more responsibilities. When you're young, your main responsibility is just taking care of yourself and learning how to become an adult. And so make the most of those years and really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that sounds like a great advice. So thank you, Arman, for your time, and it's great to listen to all your experience, and we hope our audience will like it too. So have a good day.
You too, Vishal. Thanks so much for having me on. See you. Bye.